This is our temple today. This is the temple today. So if I had a show, I don't have a chauffeur, but, well, I do have a chauffeur. He's in the audience, my husband. I call him Stud Muffin. He's driving me, but many of you had chauffeurs here today. Anyway, how many of you, because I can't see you now, so how many of you by applause know who Steve Bluestein is? Yes. That's all. He's an amazing, amazing comedian. If you want to know more about him, he has a book called Memoir of a Nobody, and it's really funny. And he has been in show business for, I don't know, all of his life. I think he grew up in Boston, and he's performed everywhere. He did opening. He opened for, here's some of the people who, again, I'm sure you've heard of these megastars: Donna Summer, Barry Manilow, Frankie Valli, Melissa Manchester, Rita Moreno, Kenny Loggins, Phyllis Diller, Dinah Shore, the fabulous Rancho Mirage Dinah Shore, not the one from, is there another one? and Juliet Prowse. So he's been around the block. And you can read about him also. He has a wonderful website you can go to. But how many of you here follow him on Facebook? I had a feeling. I saw you guys sit down. I'm like, Steve, I think there's people out there. Steve has the best. If you are on Facebook, go to Steve Bluestein and follow him because he puts the funniest stuff up there every day. He's now retired out here in the desert. And so what is happening is that in partnership with LIR, which LIR is Learning in Retirement, have any of you taken classes? Thank you for showing up. There's brochures on the back table in partnership with the Rancho Mirage Library. This is part of that. That's Steve. I've been teaching classes for a couple of years there now. I am a psychic medium. I used to do stand-up comedy, and then I found that path of comedy led me into being a psychic medium. I've been doing that for almost 40 years. And so, yeah, you can find me online at psychicshirley.com or calmthefunkdown.com. And I met Steve. I was doing a radio show, I don't know, over 20 years ago, and he called in with a random question, and we just connected. And he and I became very close friends, and I've been giving him psychic advice all over through the years. But he's the one who got my husband and I to move to Rancho Mirage because he came out here first, and he, anyway. I don't know what to say. I just got stopped. Somebody's energy in the crowd just went, oh my God, she's a psychic. I need to ask her something. So I just got stopped like that. So I'm going to let him come up to the stage now, and he's going to answer your questions. And I'm teaching a class. You can sign up. I think there's brochures back there, but the sign-up date is this week, isn't it? Wait, my husband is out there somewhere. I don't know if you can shout it out when this. October 14th, you can go online to LIR. You can see it there. And again, come up to me if you need more information. I'm teaching a class on how to interpret your dreams. And I've done classes on how I read tarot cards also, and I've done classes on that. And Steve is teaching a class on how to do stand-up. So he's here to talk about it. So I know a lot of you can barely stand up here. When we go to the desert, we can hardly stand up. But, but if you can just walk your way into a class. You'll be just walk. It's at the, where is it again? He's teaching, there's classes that are on Zoom and in person. And Steve is doing an in-person class at the College of the Desert, isn't it? At the Palm Desert Shopping Center. So I'm going to be there. So anyway, without any further ado, here is my friend Steve Bluestein.
Hi. Welcome. Well, this isn't going to work. We'll put it here. Well, I can't tell you how excited I am to be doing this. What's the matter? Well, because she handed me the wrong mic. I can't. Were you giving out business cards? No, go away. Leave me alone. So it started off great. I can't tell you what a thrill this is to be doing this here, because I've always wanted to talk loudly in a library. But welcome to my talk on the comedy boom / Rosh Hashanah service. I can't believe they got me to work on Rosh Hashanah. I should be bursting into flames at any minute. But we're all here. Look, the Gentiles are going, we have to go to Rosh Hashanah service? How many, I have some business we have to discuss first. What I'm about to tell you, these are my views. I started in comedy in the early 70s, and these are the things that I witnessed firsthand. Now, if you had 9 other comedians on this stage, each one would have a different view. And I say to those 9 other comedians, get your own library. This is my talk. This is my speech. Yeah, please do. I just started. You're already getting directions to leave? Jesus Christ. Are you done? All right, thanks. Oh, God, how they talked me into doing this. I will, if in the interim, while I'm speaking, if you have questions, please keep them to yourself. No, you just raise your hand and I'll stop my talk. They asked me to talk for 90 minutes. That ain't going to happen. We'll be out of here in 10. Let's see, I guess that's everything. The librarian wanted to make an announcement. Phyllis Grossman, your book on the art of procrastination is 4 years late. So if you're here, please don't make them break your kneecaps. Okay, so how many people here have grandchildren or children or know somebody who want to be a comedian? Great. You're going to love this talk. No one? There's nobody here? Who, where? Or a friend. One brother, it's like a mercy house. Yes, I do. Okay, leave him alone. So it's a phenomenon that has started in the early 70s, and who's to blame for it? I'll tell Elvis. It's Elvis's fault. Now, why is it Elvis's fault? Elvis had an opening act by the name of Mitzy Shore. Now, an opening act is the act that goes on prior to the headliner. I was an opening act. Our job is to warm up the audience and to quiet the room down. Because what comedian doesn't want a quiet room? And Sammy was a very successful opening for Elvis. Now, Sammy was East Coast, Jewish, Borscht Belt comedian. And so why did he work with Elvis? Because Sammy had this routine that was Reverend Sam. And it was a Southern takeoff on a Southern Reverend. And it was very popular with Elvis's audiences. So Elvis took Sammy everywhere. Sammy got a lot of recognition, very much like present today with Tom Dreesen and Frank Sinatra. The headliner finds an opening act they work with, then they tour all over the country. And that's what happened with Sammy. And Sammy had a lot of recognition, made a lot of money, and was always on the road with Elvis. But he wasn't fulfilled because every comedian's dream is to have a TV show or a talk show or something. And Sammy wanted that. Now, the only way you could get that is if you're in Los Angeles where the television industry is. So Sammy called his best friend, whose name was Rudy DeLuca. And Rudy was a comedy writer who worked mainly with Mel Brooks. And they decided, you know Rudy?
No, but I know Mel Brooks.
How nice for you. Rudy. Why do they always sit up front? The quiet ones are up back. The big ones are up front. So Sammy called his friend Rudy DeLuca, and they decided that they were going to open a nightclub in Los Angeles so that Sammy would have a place where he could be on stage for agents and managers and television executives and film people. Someplace, it was a showcase for Mitzy Shore. So they looked around the city, and they found at Ciro's nightclub. Who remembers Ciro's nightclub? Oh, you again. Boy, you're just a wealth of knowledge, aren't you? Well, Ciro's had been converted into a 50s memorabilia music club owned by Art LeBeau, and he had one half of the building, and on the other side was a small lounge that Sammy rented to for the comedy his club. I suddenly realized I didn't look at the clock when I got on here. So, has it been 90 minutes yet? Will you keep an eye on it? Just let me know. So, it sure feels like it. So, Sammy, they rented the club, and at that time in Los Angeles, there was a very popular discotheque called the Candy Store, and it was on the lips of everybody in L.A. So Sammy decided that he would call his club the Comedy Store. Ooh, murmur, 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 murmur. So he called the Comedy Store. Now, there had never been a club specifically for comedy, but I'm going to take a little side road here. It wasn't the first club. In New York City, because I went there in 1968, there was a club called the Improv. It's like I've got a room full of my mother. Now tell them what else. There was, Jesus Christ. So, glad you came here from rotating the crops. What the hell is that? So, this club called the Improv. It was on 9th Avenue and 49th Street. Larry, is that right? 44th. And it was in the theater district in New York, and it was, after the shows, the kids from the shows would come, and they would sing, and they would dance, and they'd do music and magic, and there were comedians, but it wasn't specifically for comedy. And an interesting side note is, if you ever go to a comedy club and they always have a brick wall behind the stage, that's because at the Improv in New York, all those exposed brick walls, the Improv had an exposed brick wall behind their stage, so that was replicated in all these comedy clubs across the country. So the truth is, the Improv was the first showcase club. The Comedy Store was the first club specifically for comedy. There was no music, there was no singing, there was no magic, but there was only comedy. And when the word got out in Los Angeles that there was a club for comedy, the whole comedy community went crazy. Everybody decided that they would go. And it became, that club in those early years became like a big hangout. Everybody was there. Now, I have written down the names because I'm old now, and I can't remember anybody's name. I can tell you what they look like. I can tell you what they drove. I can tell you what color their hair is and how tall they are. I cannot tell you their name. You know, it's like, you know that woman, she had a divorce, her husband had an affair, but she didn't want to leave him because she didn't want him to get the money? You mean Mom? Yeah, that's what my life is like. So in those first years, the comedy, Buck Henry would come in and just hang out. Pat McCormick, Flip Wilson, Red Fox, the late John Amos was there. Craig T. Nelson. Do any of these names mean anything to you? All right. Barry Levinson. He's in Temple today, I'll tell you that. Joe E. Ross. Remember Joe E. Ross? What? No, not Borscht. Car 54, where are you? Oh, yeah, that's right. Ted Lange from Love Boat. Chuck McCann and Michael Keaton got his start there. They all hung out at the Comedy Store. And it was like this. You'd come in at 9 o'clock, and you'd sit at the back of the bar, and Sammy would say, all right, you're going to go up next. And you'd go up. Or he'd say, you're going to go up next. And then a producer would come in, and Sammy would say, no, you're not going up next. I'm going up. And that's because that was the purpose of the club. The truth of the matter is that everybody else got work from the Comedy Store but Sammy. The industry was not really interested in Sammy's work, but they were interested in the new talent that was coming out of the Comedy Store. Michael Keaton was a stand-up comic and got his start. And Harry Columby was a manager who was at the Comedy Store and saw Michael Keaton and said, I want to sign you. But he wanted to sign him because Harry saw the potential of Michael as an actor. Oh, learned something new today, we did. So, this is so fun. Also, well, let me describe the room to you first, because it's really important to understand that you just can't do comedy anywhere. Like this room, for instance. Everything that's wrong is here. In this room is here. But in this little lounge that Sammy opened up, there is it 90 minutes now? All right, you let me know. It was a small square room with a low ceiling, and on one wall was a mural of Paris. We don't know why, but it was there, I guess from Ciro's days. There were banquettes on the side and a bar in the back. There wasn't a bad seat in the room. The sight lines were all perfect for comedy. And it had a small stage in the front, and it was like nirvana for comedy people. So Sammy had these shows that started at about 9 o'clock and went till about 1 a.m. That's a lot of comedy. That's a lot of 20-minute slots. And he needed to fill the spots because many nights he couldn't depend on just people walking in off the street. So he hired a group of 4 improvisers and called them the Comedy Store Players. And these were people who would take suggestions from the audience, and they would do improv, and they would do like a half an hour. They would eat up part of the time. Now, who were the Comedy Store Players? The first group, because they evolved, Pat Proft, Valerie Curtin, Gary Austin, Archie Hahn, Carol White, Bo Capral, and myself. Now, who are they? What did these people, what happened to them? All right. Valerie Curtin. Valerie wrote the movie And Justice for All. She also wrote the movie Best Friends. She was in the movie, she acted in the movie Alice doesn't live here anymore. She was one of the main characters. And she married Barry Levinson, who she met at the Comedy Store. Pat Proft. Pat Proft stayed at the Comedy Store for about 9 months, then transitioned over to a theater called the Kentucky Fried Theater, which was the Zucker brothers. They're in Temple today, too. The Zucker brothers. I'm the only one. I'm waiting for the lightning at any moment. The Zucker brothers films. Now, what did Pat write? Pat wrote Airplane, Police Academy, Bachelor Party, Real Genius, Naked Gun 1, 2, and 3, Hot Shots, Scary Movie, and that's all. Pat is a movie producer, and a great story that I have with Pat is that Pat was really a professional Gentile. He was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and he would go out for everything. You know, I go out, they would send me out if there was a terrorist that lived next door. I would get that part. But Pat went out for the boy next door, and he had an appointment at not Paramount, 20th Century Fox, for a movie interview. And I went along with him, and we were walking through the sets, the Hello Dolly sets, and we were like young kids and going, wow, I can't believe it. 3 years later, he had an office in the studio. And that's what that Comedy Store did. It brought all these people together and gave the industry a place where they could find new talent. There was also a guy there who was named Bobby Herbeck. Bobby wasn't really a stand-up. He was just part of the comedy community. And Bobby went on to write Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It sounds like someone sunk a putt. You know what I mean? You know, I'm expecting polite applause, you know. Ooh, thank you. Oh, don't try to win me over now. I still have 3 more cards left. All right, now Gary Austin. Gary was, Pat and Bo were the powerhouse in the group. And Gary was the kind of shy, kind of thin, kind of country kind of kid. And he was overshadowed by Bo and Pat. And he decided that he was going to leave the group and start his own group, a class in improv, because he had been active in improv in the ceiling in San Francisco. Shorts, you got all dressed up for the talk, huh? So he started this class, and in that class was Cindy Williams and ooh. I love an audience with sound effects. You know, it's ooh. Cindy Williams and Rita Wilson, who's married to Tom Hanks, and myself and Lorraine Newman and Tracy Newman. Now, who else? Who's the guy? What? Who, what? Speak up. I'm not a lip reader. Paul Newman, yes. Can't believe I wasted the time with that. Paul Newman. Yes, Paul was there, along with Barbara Streisand. We were all in the class together. So I can't remember, from Star Wars, No, not Carrie Fisher. Let's play. No, it's a guy, Harrison Ford. Bing, 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 bing. All right, and they were all in that class, and we met in a small theater on Vermont. Someone's reading my mind. In a small theater on Vermont called the Cellar Theater, and we met once a week, and it was the work that was created in that show. Oh, Valerie Curtin was also in the class, and also Archie Hahn. Now, Archie's one of those guys who's a working actor, if you saw his face, you would know him immediately, but you don't know his name. He's just a brilliant actor. And Gary said, we should have a show. So don't look at your watch. You're right in front of me. You don't think I have feelings? You're not just a joy yourself to look at. So what was I talking about? Oh, the whole audience. We don't know. Harrison Ford, yeah. All right, so Gary said, let's put on a show. So we did. We put on a show. And that class became the Groundling Theater. Oh, you're interested now, I see. So let's see who started. Let's see who's in the Groundling Theater. I can't find the card. Oh, here it is. Now, the Groundling Theater Gary passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. But the Groundling Theater has gone on to be an institution in Los Angeles in the 80s and 90s, much like the Comedy Store was in the 70s for finding new talent. From the Groundlings, we got Pee Wee Herman, Elvira, Phil Hartman, Lisa Kudrow, Kathy Griffin. Interesting story. Kathy comes up to me one night and she says, Steve, I'm going to do stand-up. And I went, oh, God, why? She showed me. Will Farrell, Kristen Wiig, Maya Rudolph, Jennifer Coolidge, Conan O'Brien, Jimmy Fallon, Melissa McCarthy, Will Forte, and the list goes on and on and on. So that little detour in the stand-up comedy world it's an offshoot of what actually was created at the Comedy Store. Gary came to town. He met all these people. He formed a class, and that class became an institution in Los Angeles. Now, from the new, as the Comedy Store worked, that first year, a bunch of new comedians came out. I was just going through my mind. Kip Adada, George Miller, Tom Dreesen, Elaine Boozler, Johnny Dark, Jay Leno, David Letterman, Robin Tyler, Murray Langston, and Shirley Hemphill. That's just off the top of my, believe me, there were much more. Now, Murray Langston, the unknown comic. Remember? It's like a void, I ask a question, people go, Robin, Robin Tyler, Tom Dreesen, George Miller, Johnny Dark. Today's Johnny's birthday. Did you know? Yeah, today's Johnny's birthday. I called him this morning. Johnny was on the David Letterman show as the oldest page in America. That was, I don't know if you remember, do you people stay up that late? 9 o'clock, huh? I figured. So we had all these new comedians. And so that's how it went for a year. New comics were coming out of the woodwork. excitement in town, and about a year went by, and Sammy came up to me and he said, they're sucking me dry. I said, what do you mean? Well, everyone was drinking for free. Now you're interested. They were all drinking for free. And, a bunch of alcoholics said, hey, let's go to the Comedy Store. So he had to impose a 2-drink limit on the comedians. And his comedian base dropped off by about 50%. Nobody was coming. No, they had no acts to put on stage. And at the same time, the audiences dropped off because in Los Angeles, it's very cyclical. Things become hot and everybody runs to them for a minute, and then they get tired of it and they go to the new thing, and they go, and so that's what was happening at the Comedy Store. It had run its course. About that time, Sammy and his wife Mitzy, their marriage was failing, and they were getting divorced. And Mitzy called me up one night, and she said, I want you to come to the house because I want you to witness our divorce settlement. This was a dream come true. Because I hadn't gone enough with my own parents, now I had to go with other people's. So I went to their house, and that night, Sammy gave Mitzy the club, the Comedy Store. And he gave it to her because it was dying, and he figured, hey, it's a divorce settlement. So what he didn't know was that Mitzy was a marketing genius, And she took over the club, and who said it's true? I like people who never met the woman go, it's true. Because the maid who used to work for my brother-in-law told me that his sister once heard that. So, how much is it now? What? Half an hour? Oh, shadow puppets, look. Oh, shut up. Okay, so Mitzy was a marketing genius. And the first thing she did, the very first thing, she had little matchbooks made she created a logo with the Comedy Store. And she had little matchbooks made and ashtrays. She put them on every table. And so everyone stole them. But that was a good thing. She wanted them to be stolen because she wanted people to say, hey, what's this? It's a Comedy Store. So she started getting the name up. Then the next thing she did was she painted out Paris. Yeah, she painted it out, and she actually painted the whole room black, which we thought was insane, but she painted it black. And she found an artist who did caricatures of comedians. And she bought 5 or 6 or 7 and had them put around the room. So within 6 months, the room suddenly had an instantaneous look. She started hanging pictures of the comedians in the front, and the club was starting to look like a business, which it had not, up until this time, had looked like just a hangout, just a place to hang out. So the most important thing Mitzy did was she said, we just can't have people coming in willy-nilly. There has to be a show. There has to be a lineup. People have to know that if they're coming to my club, at 9 o'clock they'll see me, and at 10 o'clock they'll see so-and-so. And so she set up a phone line, and she called and sent to all the comedians, if you want to get on the show, you have to call in on Monday and get a time slot. And, at this point, there were maybe 35 or 40 comedians, tops, working. Today, there are about 40,000. Truly, my cleaning woman does 20 minutes while she's lazy, Mr. Steve, when I was walking. And they said that'll never work. But came that first Monday, everybody called in, and by Monday night, everybody had a time slot, and the regime had started. The club was going, started to pick up a little bit. Business was getting better because the audiences were, there was a structured show that they could enjoy. About this time, The Tonight Show had already moved from New York City to Los Angeles. And about this time, the comics from New York were coming out to L.A. to be seen by The Tonight Show. So out comes David Brenner, out comes, wait, what? No, now they're shouting out comics' names. Yes, that's it. Paul Newman. God, are you annoying. Gabe Kaplan. I remembered. This is so sad that they're applauding memory loss. Well, you can all relate, right? I'm so happy that you showed up. What are we supposed to do today? So they all came out. Also who came out at that time was Jimmy Walker. So Jimmy came out to Los Angeles to be seen by The Tonight Show. The Tonight Show saw him. They liked him. They put him on the show. Norman Lear saw him on The Tonight Show and Good Times. Silence. Oh, it was a horrible show. But Jimmy was very popular. Now, part of the deal that Jimmy made with Norman Lear, does he need a wake-up call? All right. Part of the deal that they made with Norman Lear was that Jimmy was to get 5 writers. He got his salary, he got his dressing room, and he got 5 writers who would have followed Jimmy around and write Jimmy's stand-up act. Because Jimmy was a stand-up comedian, he was not an actor, and his passion was stand-up. So this was a big deal. But now he needed a place to break in new material. So he called Mitzy, and he said, "Can I come in?" Mitzy said, "Are you kidding?" Of course. And so Jimmy started coming to the Comedy Store every single night. And word got out that the kid, the Dynamite Kid from Good Times, was appearing live at the Comedy Store, and the lines were around the corner. Jimmy brought with him Richard Pryor. Jimmy saw Richard, told him about the Comedy Store. Richard Pryor came. So Richard calls Mitzy and says, "I need spots." Mitzy says, "Be my guest." So now we have Jimmy Walker and Richard Pryor appearing nightly at the Comedy Store. The business went through the roof. Richard brought Paul Mooney. Now, I don't know if this crowd would know who Paul Mooney is. Do you? Yeah, a few. But Paul was a genius. He was insane, but he was a genius, and he wrote for Richard. So there's a whole new element coming to the Comedy Store, something that the industry had never seen before. African American comedians had been there, but they had always been off to the side by themselves. Now they're in the mainstream. So we have all the Comedy Store is growing, and the business is boom. Mitzy's making money hand over fist. She calls me up and she says, "I'm going to open up another club." I thought, that's insane. What is she going to, where? And she said she's going to open up a club in Westwood. Now, Westwood is where UCLA is. Again, Mitzy had her finger on the pulse of comedy. All those college kids at UCLA heard about the Comedy Store in Westwood and packed it every night. So now she's got Sunset, and now instead of one show a night, she split it in half, and there are 2 shows. So she's collecting 2 covers and two drink minimums. She's doubling her income, and now she's got the Westwood Club. That went on for about a year, and then there had never been, the only place that we had comedy clubs was in Los Angeles. She said she wanted to test the market to see if it could work out in other cities. And so she went to La Jolla, and she found a club, a building, and she opened up the La Jolla Comedy Store. But this is where Mitzy's genius really was. Her son, Scotty, was a real estate broker. And Scotty said, we should buy a condo and put the comedians up in the condo. And if the club fails, we can sell the condo and make money. Genius. So that's what they did. They bought a condo. And to this day, when a comedian is on the road and he's working in a club, no matter Cincinnati, Chicago, Miami, Denver, and they put them up in a place, it's called the Comedy Condo. And that comes from Mitzy's club in San Diego. Okay, just bear with me a second. So now the club in San Diego worked, in La Jolla worked. Now suddenly there's a club opening up in Newport Beach that has nothing to do with Mitzy. And she called me up and she said, they stole everything. And they did. They stole the lineup. They stole the way the club was structured. And Mitzy, comedians, you put a comedian on stage, you say, do 10 minutes, and, 35 minutes later, they're still on. That won't happen tonight, but I can't wait to get out of here. So Mitzy came up with this idea of, there was a picture of Groucho Marx on the wall. She put a light on it, and when it was time for the comic to get off, she'd light the light. Well, the Newport Beach Club stole the idea and used it. Now, that idea is now in every club in America. So the Newport Beach Club also became successful. Suddenly, the business world started to learn that there was an interest in comedy, and every bar in America that had a band suddenly learned, I don't have to deal with 5 musicians. I can have one comedian in my club and make twice as much money. And that's what happened. Comedy clubs opened up all over the country. There were, and they had the most ridiculous names, Ha-Has and Tee-Hees and the Chuckle Hut and, all these ridiculous places. Cities like Houston had a club called Spellbinders, and Spellbinders because it was a magic club, and she learned that comedy was hot, so she dumped the magic and she put in comedians. Spellbinders had 2 clubs. That's how big it was, even in Texas. So at this point, we're talking now, must be the late 80s. I was 85. Yeah, the late 80s. Denver, Miami, Chicago. Now, side note, Chicago always had a comedy industry because Second City was based out of Chicago. And Second City is much like the Groundlings, but they're much older. I would say that the Groundlings was built on the foundation that the Second City created. And Second City created Elaine May and Fred Willard and Robert Klein and who else? Do you know? David Steinberg. Yeah, good. That's good. Anybody? You want to do this? I'll just pass the mic around and you can tell each other names. It was an incredible time because there were what they called road warriors on the road. Those were comedians who did nothing but these little comedy clubs. And they loved them, and they went from one to another, earning $200,000-$300,000 a year, and some people you never heard of, and never will, because the industry was in Los Angeles, and they were in Tuscaloosa. You know what I mean? So, all right. Now, the Improv. About the same time that Mitzy was structuring her shows and creating interest in comedy, the Improv was doing the same thing, and they had gone from variety acts to specifically stand-up comic, all of them. And they came out to Los Angeles to open a club in Los Angeles. The Improv, Bud Friedman came out. And hence, the feud began. And I was there the night it started. Bud came out to Los Angeles to scout a location. He came to the Comedy Store. Mitzy sent a drink over to the table, and Bud said, "Tell her I don't need her drink." And oh yeah, it was a nice evening that night. And the feud began. And suddenly, you were either a Comedy Store comic or an Improv comic. And it was very difficult to cross those lines. I happened to be a Comedy Store comic, and I worked at the Improv because of my charm, but many of the guys couldn't. They were ostracized, and there was a time the feud got so bad that there was a fire at the Improv, and rumor had it that some of the Comedy Store comics had set the fire. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was it was like a mountain feud. So they have the fire. They're rebuilding the club. Into town comes a guy by the name of Mark Lenow. Mark and his wife are actors. They're both actors. They're New York actors. And Mark approaches Bud and says, "I'd like to become a partner in the club." Well, the club had just burnt down. So Bud said, "Sure." Bring a dustpan. And so Mark got in there, and he orchestrated a renovation of the club, created very much a hierarchy like Mitzy had at her club, and suddenly, now the Improv was booming. And because they were booming, they started opening clubs all over the country. I think I just read that the Improv sold the business to a entertainment conglomerate for millions. So they did well. I was lucky enough to be at the club the night that Andy Kaufman got on stage for the first time. I was there the night that Gallagher smashed his first watermelon. I was there with the Sledge-O-Matic, and we all sat Thank you. We all sat in the audience and watched him. He dragged a trunk out onto stage, and he pressed a button, and the trunk opened, and it became like a circus tent. And he kept pulling watermelons and stuff out of and we just sat there going, "What the hell is this?" Because we were all monologists. Monologists, is that the word? I don't know how to say it. I just know how to do it. And also Robin Williams. Robin came into town, and there was no question in our minds that we were witnessing a superstar. David Letterman and Jay Leno, and we were all there. It was all the beginning of an entire industry that is still happening today. So now comes an interesting part. So all the club owners are making money, and I mean big money. None of the comedians are being paid. It's all, Mitzy said, it's a college. You're learning how to do it while she's having her kitchen redone. So I get a phone call one night from Tom Dreesen, who said, "Look, we have to do something about this." So we're having a meeting at my house, and all the comedians, there must have been 50 by this time, because they were breeding, like feral rabbits. And 50 comedians at Tom, and they decided that they were going on strike. And the comedians went on strike. Tom Dreesen looks at me and he says, "Steve, you do the publicity." Thank you. So I called every television station, every newspaper, every radio station I could think of. I got a list. I called them all, and I said, "Look, the comedians are going on strike, and I think you should get." And sure enough, all the media showed up, and we picketed the Comedy Store for like 2 weeks. And as a sad note, I heard through the grapevine that Mitzy was very upset that I was on the picket line, because I had been so instrumental in the beginning years of the Comedy Store. But, truth be told, there were guys that were eating cat food because they had no money, and the club owners were making a fortune. So the bottom line was that a union was formed, and we started getting paid. Even if it was, Tom said, even if it's $10, it's gas money. And that's what happened. So the strike happened. Now, after the strike, there were many egos were bruised, and people were hurt, and friendships were destroyed. But Mitzy continued on. She continued. She was always innovating. She said to me, "Steve, I found a new one." "Who?" "Yakov Smirnoff." "What? What's a Yakov?" And she dragged me, and he's the Russian comedian. And I looked at her like she was crazy. Yeah, she was crazy. He had a show in Branson for 12 years. there was a third room in the building because at this point, Mitzy was determined to buy the building, and she wanted Art Laboe out. And they did everything. She did everything in her power to get him out because she wanted that main room because she saw the way comedy was going that she could get big name comedians to play the main room, the big room, and then have her regular, new guys in the original room. It took, I think, a couple of $1 million, and Art did sell the building to Mitzy, and she renovated the whole thing, just made it the premier comedy club showroom. She also enlarged the original room by about 50 feet. She moved the wall back so that she could get more people into her original room, and it still didn't affect the main room. But there was a third room in the building, upstairs, and she's sitting home at night. She said, "What can I do with that room? Women." And so Mitzy created the belly room, which was she called it the belly room because it was in the belly of the building. It was deep in the building. And it was a place for women only to do stand-up. Unheard of. Up until this time, we basically had 3 female comedians. We had Joan Rivers, we had Phyllis Diller, we had Toady Fields. They were the commercial ones. Then there was Belle Barth and Rusty Warren, who were more blue and Vegas type, but they weren't doing television. Joan, Phyllis, and Toady were mainstream television. But that was it. There were no and in terms of new comedians, there were no women. No women. There was one, Robin Tyler. And Robin Tyler was a lesbian, and she and her lover, Tyler and Harrison, I remembered their names. Tyler and they were a comedy team, and they were the only women in the first year who stood on that stage, beside Valerie, but she wasn't doing stand-up. She was doing improv. So they created the belly room. And I have to tell you, it's as good as the downstairs rooms were, that's how bad the upstairs room was. It was awful. It was small. It was confined. There were sight lines, but it just wasn't conducive to comedy. And yet, Sandra Bernhardt, Carrie Snow, Elaine Boozler, Monica Piper, Kathy Ladman, all came out of the belly room. These are all women who are working stand-up comedians today. So, what happened next? I'll check my cards. So, what happened next was everyone decided that comedy was big business, and that happened, that crossed over into the media. And suddenly there was a cable network called, I think it was called Comedy Central. Was it Comedy Central? And now Comedy Central, people were saying, well, why do I have to go to a club and pay cover and 2-drink minimum? I can see comedy in my own living room. But the problem with Comedy Central was that a stand-up comedian can take 10 minutes worth of material and do it all over the country for years. He does that same 10 minutes on television, and it's no longer any good because everyone's seen it. It's not like music. You can do music, you can sing a song over and over and over. You can't tell a joke over and over and over. The second time you've heard it. So the surprise is gone and there's no laughter. So Comedy Central was chewing up comedians like, I don't know what, but it wasn't a good thing. They were using them up. And so all the A comedians were used up. So now they go to the B comedians. And then they use up all the B comedians. And then they use the C comedians. And then my cleaning girl had a show. It was, and so what happened to comedy was when you had inventive, smart, another adjective, what? That's it. Unique comedians. They weren't there anymore because the guys who were coming up on television had no experience. And the thing that was interesting about, my generation was we learned from the people who learned from the people who learned from vaudeville. So the vaudeville entertainers, they were in the troops. They were live entertaining. I used to say you could shoot a gun off in a theater. They'd know what to do. Then the next generation was movies, film, and TV. And then, so these people learned from the vaudevillians, and then our generation learned from the television people. But the new generation were learning from each other because they were in those comedy clubs and they watched other comedians, and suddenly all you got was the same kind of, it was all sounding the same. They all talked about the same thing: relationships, sex, their genitalia. I mean, that's all. And you got to have this comedy club sound. And what it did was it degraded the stature of comedy. And now, of course, there are bright spots in the new generation of comics. John Mulaney is brilliant. I could watch that kid. The female comic who I love, Wanda Sykes. Wanda Sykes. You know how you know someone is good? I'm flipping through the TV like this. She's on. I go, what's that? That's how that's someone who has something special. Seinfeld, Gary Shandling, they're all, bright spots. But for the most part, comedy I think, has dissipated. And it's showing in the clubs because the clubs are closing up. People are tired of it. The clubs are closing up. A club that would pay me, $5,000 for a week is now offering $1,500. They used to pay $5,000 and airfare and a place to stay. Now they're offering $1,500, no airfare. So nobody wants to go out and do those. So what happens is the locals get those jobs. The locals who aren't, who are doing local jokes that don't translate to national audiences. So the comedy is not expanding like it used to, like it was in the 80s. No, you're... I have to change my diaper. How much more? 24. 23. Not 22. It's like suddenly it's become an auction. All right, I'd like to take questions. All right, what is it?
Whatever happened to Polly Shore?
Oh, shut the lights, shut the lights. I don't want to see them. No, seriously. Pauly Shore, that's a good question. Pauly Shore is Sammy Shore's son. Sammy had four. What? Well, ask what you mean. I'm not a mind reader, you know. Sammy never got his television series. Like I said, the industry was not interested in Sammy. Sammy was very old school. He was a great guy and a good friend of mine, but he was old school, and the industry was only interested in the new people. Now, 1 second. Don't get pushy. Sammy had 4 kids. Scott, who was a real estate broker, Petey, Polly, and Sandy. We'll never forgive Sammy for Pauly Shore. That's all I'll say about that. What?
I think you mentioned what the term view line was. It when you're the atmosphere of a club. Could you elaborate on that? Is the term view line?
Sight line.
Sight line. Could you elaborate a little bit? What is the sight line?
A sight line is the line that you have with sight. Does that help? How did you people become an audience? Was there a bus or something that brought you all? A sight line is the line from like you to me, you to the stage. Like you ever go to a theater and there's a pole right in the middle of in your seats behind it? That's an obstructed sight line. Does that?
In other words, I guess what I'm getting at, you as a comedian.
Yes. You scare me. What?
Well, you scare me too. But anyway.
Where are you going?
Are you saying that as a comedian, the sight lines are really important because you can basically communicate with the entire audience? That's what I'm getting at.
Yes, that's exactly right. Sylvia. One of the things for stand-up is focus. You can't. The thing that Mitzy taught me by painting the room black was it took away all the distractions that are in the room, and it put focus right where it should be. And she put a spotlight in to even focus it more, so that the sight lines were not only clear, but they were well defined.
How important is it that you see the people in the audience?
I don't want to see the people in the audience. I never wanted to. You know why? Because I look out and it's like my mother in one dress. And it's not a good thing. No, that's part of the distraction. I don't want to be distracted by, wondering, what Nancy's doing. Any other questions? Yes. Wait, hold it. 1 second. What?
So there was a wonderful series that was on HBO, and telling a lot of the story that you're telling us right now.
All right.
Do you remember it?
There was a series on HBO called The Comedy Store. Yeah, I think it was called The Comedy Store. That had as much to do with the Comedy Store as Arnold Schwarzenegger has to do with the Bolshoi. I watched one episode and I got sick to my stomach. I couldn't watch it because there was absolutely no reality to that. Was strictly, they took the name and they fantasized. What?
This one had comedians and they wanted to go on the Tonight Show, and it was a drama. And then
Yeah, that's the same show. Yes, we're talking about the same show. Yeah. Yes, who else had a question? Wait, all right, go ahead. Question? All right. All right, good, because I can't see you.
What about people like Alan
That's the generation before us. That's the 60s and the 50s. And I will tell you about Alan King. One son of a bitch. Oh. I'm as mean as he was in his stand-up, that's how mean he was off stage. Yes, I'm sorry to break your bubble. Well, comedy is taken over all over the world. It's England, Australia. I did a show in Australia for 3 months. They wouldn't let me leave. I wanted to leave, but but I'll tell you what, a lot of the comedians are doing now are cruise ships. Oh, this is my idea of a nightmare. Being trapped with an audience in the middle of the ocean. Oh, just shoot me now. I have never done a cruise ship, nor will I ever do one. It's just that. No, it's not. Well, actually, there are some really good comics who just, because the comedy club's circuit has closed down, they have to go there. They have to go. And I don't fault them, but I just can't. Okay, what is it? I feel like Stevie Wonder. What? Just ask the question. Right.
Really hurt the comedy clubs because the comedy clubs, they do the same material all over.
Thank you for the review.
But the same thing happened with vaudeville. Guys that work all across the country, but then radio came along. And once you played it on radio, you couldn't do it anymore. So that became the advent of comedy writers. They had to come up with fresh material every week.
Is there an end to this question? It's like I'm getting his thesis from college. No, you're right, but I'm only dealing with what I know, which was from the early 70s. I started in 71, I think. And, oh, thank God. What? I don't know about many. I know 4. No, Jerry's. Why? Why do you say that? Who told you? I want names. No, I don't think Jerry is disliked. There's a lot of envy in stand-up. A lot of, and Jerry's a billionaire, and I'm here. So, if you get my drift. So there's no envy at all. Anybody else? All right, yes, what?
I've heard that a lot of really good comedians have come out of Boston. Is that true?
Well, I happen to be from Boston. Are you from Boston? I lost my accent. Oh, yes, I studied very hard. Yes, well, that's part of the, as the comedy circuit grew, Boston became one of the hubs because there's so many colleges and schools in Boston with theater departments that are encouraging them. So there's a place called Nick's, I think, that became a comedy club. And there's a lot of and they're very, what's the word? That's the word. Would you go on the road with me? They're very insular. They stick together and they're a very specific sound, because of their accent.
There's a lady over here with a question.
All right.
I'm just curious, do you have an opinion on where it's going to go? You kind of
Yeah, I think it's, I wish I could tell you. I feel maybe it's just going to, dwindle down to a trickle. Something else will come along. Well, something else has come along, and that's the internet. And the internet, you have influencers and people who are doing videos, and that's where people are finding talent now. So there'll always be. What? Oh, well, thank you for bringing the whole room down. Life is not terrible, and then you die, and what's left to go?
What is it about your background that brought you into comedy? In other words,
Oh, you don't have enough time. You don't have.
start as a child, so to speak?
Well, I operate under the assumption that there are two types of comedians. There's the intrinsically funny comic, like David Brenner is an intrinsically funny comedian. David was walking down the street in New York. A manhole blew up into the air, and David went, heads. That, without thinking, that's an intrinsically funny comedian. And then there are technicians who have learned if you say 7 words in a row and stop, the audience will laugh. No, Jerry's not that way. Jerry's has an instinct that's different. He's observational. Jerry observes and comments.
Is there a blend of the two?
There is a blend of the two, yeah, but I was always the intuitively funny person. Thank you for the validation. And so I was just I was an assistant budget handbag buyer. I know you're jealous, for the May Company, and I was living in an apartment building in Hollywood, and Dave Madden, who was Reuben on the Partridge Family, was living in the building. And we were sitting around the pool one day, and I was doing what basically I did tonight, just commenting and insulting people. And, oh, you're up. How nice. And Dave came over to me and said, you could do this professionally. I said, I could? He said, yes, there's a club that just opened called the Comedy Store. And Dave Madden took me to the Comedy Store the next night. And I sat in the audience and I went, I could do that and I never have to take inventory again. And that's how it started. I guess we're done. What? Oh, there's someone from LA. What? Who is that? Yeah. No, there were rumors that Ollie Joe Prather, who was a staunch Comedy Store comedian, burned down the Improv by setting the dumpster behind it on fire. But there's never been any proof, and Ollie's dead, so I know I didn't do it.
What do you think of
Dave
Dave Chappelle?
Chappelle, I think he's troubled.
I mean, he had a chance to make millions and millions of dollars, and he just let it go.
Yeah, because he's troubled. Look, they're breaking up into small conversation groups now. You have to leave? I thought you'd never go. Go ahead, go. Your bus is here. Don't fool me. You're off to Temple, I know. I know. I know that. Oh, I love Chris. I'll tell you why I love Chris. I lived in Bel Air in L.A., and at the top of the Bel Air, Beverly Glen, there's a little market, and I was up there in the market, and Chris was there, and the checker asked Chris for an autograph, and he gave her the autograph and then gave her a tip. And I thought, that's the sweetest man I ever knew. So when that other schmuck slapped him at the Academy Awards, I saw the reaction on Chris's face, and I knew it was genuine. He was shocked because he would never, he's. Yeah, I know. I think we're done. Isn't that a nice? Oh. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you had a good time. Oh, one more question. About my class? Yes, I'm teaching at the mall. Eat your heart out, Jerry. What? Well, I swear to God to you, I have no idea. You'll have to ask Shirley. She'll know. All right. How do we end this? We just run out of the room crazy? Oh, there we go. Thank you.